Don't miss new episodes of So What Happened To, Saturday mornings on RatedEm.
Recently, we ranked every mainline Xbox controller. We started with the console series beginnings with the original Xbox in the 2000s, and traveled up through time to the most recent console, the Series X, and I gave my thoughts on each respective controller. Today, we're continuing this mini-series with every PlayStation controller. We're going to start at the PS1 all the way up to the most recent PS5. So in today's episode of RatedEm, we're ranking every PlayStation controller. To go over our rules again, official mainline console controllers only. No peripherals, so no things like the PlayStation Move or the iToy covered here. Although that does sound like it could be its own video, so leave a comment if you want to see that and subscribe to catch it. We're also ranking each of these controllers based on comfortability and visual design, and it's all my opinion just for fun, so don't get too upset with me in the comments. And speaking of, if you really like one of these controllers, let me know about it in the comments. I read each and every one and I try to reply to as many as I can, so let me know if you're a diehard PS4 controller fan or a dedicated PS2 controller hater or whatever. Let's start with the PlayStation 1. Now there's two controllers to talk about here, and the differences are somewhat drastic, so I am going to cover both of them, but later down the line, we'll homogenize a few controllers that are mostly the same, mainly the 6-axis and the DualShock 3 to spoil it. The differences are just not as crazy with those ones. The original PlayStation 1 controller is one that I've never really liked. I did own one during my big gaming collector phase when I was really just starting out with RatedEm. I just don't think this D-pad's comfortable, and it's the only quote-unquote movement input that this controller has. It's also just a little small for my hands. I do like this color with this specific controller design though. I find it to look very techno-zen, even though the PS1 was way before that aesthetic was prominent. I'll put it at C. It's really not terrible, but I would probably avoid using it if I could. Next up in the PS1 category is the first ever DualShock. Now this controller is just a PS1 controller with joysticks, which gave developers 2 additional inputs to work with. Ape Escape is a notable game that utilized both sticks. It is a step up from the first, but if I'm being honest, the 2 joysticks with this color scheme I just personally think looks a little ugly. I can't really put it into words, but this lightish gray with the large black joysticks is just kind of clashing. I'm gonna put it at B tier. It's a step up, but I really don't like the look. Now we're moving on to the PlayStation 2 and the DualShock 2 controller. Now I mentioned with the last controller, the light gray and the black joysticks clashed, and this controller is what they should have done with the first one. The all black design complements the biggest eye-drawing features of the controller, and it looks a lot more sleek than the previous one. The pressure-sensitive buttons were also a really cool addition. If you watch my 8th generation games video, I talked about controller or console and user interaction through gimmicks like the adaptive controllers on the PS5, and I think that the DualShock 2's pressure-sensitive buttons fit right into that basket. It's a thing I personally really like. I'm a sucker for gimmicks, what can I say? I remember it best being used in Metal Gear Solid 3, I believe. If you held down the button lightly, you could aim the gun in first person, and then when you held the button down fully, it would fire the gun that you were holding. I'll put the DualShock 2 in A tier. It looks really nice and it has some really good functionality. Now we're moving on over to the PS3, and again, I said I was going to label both the 6-axis and the DualShock 3 as the same controller, because from my knowledge, the differences aren't really that big. I put a lot of use into the PS3 controller. I do remember it being very light, which I honestly don't really like. It made it feel kind of flimsy and fake despite being the official controller for the console. I do really like the rechargeable capabilities though. Other consoles of the time were reliant on batteries, so being able to charge the controllers right from the console itself with the included cable was really nice. It also kept the all black color scheme, which I think still looks really good. It's going in A tier for me. I don't really have a lot of complaints with this controller.
Need a new form of entertainment in your life? Join the thousands of others who have considered subscribing. Side effects may include joy, laughter, and newfound knowledge about video games. Talk to your doctor about if subscribing is right for you.
You're watching RatedEm. Don't touch that remote.
I was going to say moving on to a more recent entry, but to be honest, no, this thing's fucking old. We're looking at the PS4 controller next. Now I had an Xbox One during this generation, so I didn't get to use this one all too much until about last year when I bought a used PS4 to play some exclusives. And now that I finally own one, wow, I missed out. The PS4 controller is great. Every button on it has a very soft feel, and I usually prefer my controller buttons or my keyboards to feel crisp and clicky, but the PS4 controller's soft buttons feel really good, I won't lie. The joysticks are much more comfortable than the previous iterations, not that they were uncomfortable, but the PS4 ones are just a different style that I really don't mind. This controller came bundled with a few gimmicky features like a gyroscope and obviously the touchpad, and as a big gimmick person, obviously I love these elements. And the D-pad, oh my god, the D-pad. I wish I got to play Street Fighter V during its height with this controller. I promise you, I would have been a demon online. The D-pad feels very accurate and secure within the controller, if that makes sense. I really like it. My only issues with this controller are the share button. I am still a year later pressing this thing thinking it's a select button when it's not. And also the speaker. I really don't like that this thing has a speaker. When I upgraded something in God of War 3 for the first time and I had the screams of the damned yelling at me, it actually scared me. I didn't even know there was a speaker in the controller until that very moment. Other than that, this thing is an S-tier pick for me. I think this is one of the most quintessential video game console controllers of all time. Now, finally, we're talking about the PS5 controller. This is the only PlayStation controller I haven't used because, well, I don't own a PS5. I like the design of it. It's very sleek. I'm in love with the glass-like buttons. And I do like the idea of the adaptive triggers and the haptic feedback, I just don't know how utilized they are in games. It's also USB-C, which is a nice addition. I'll put it in A tier because it seems really good, it looks really good, but I've never held one, I can't really give that much of an opinion on it. So with that, we've covered every PlayStation controller over the years. If you haven't seen my Xbox controller video, I highly suggest you go check it out. And if you want to see me rank every Nintendo controller, be sure to subscribe because that one's going to be a long video and it's on its way.